let's do an activity if you're okay with that. So I'll ask you, estimate the electricity bill of my house, and let's see what kind of questions do you ask and what is the final number you get at.
Yeah, so I don't think, again, the final number doesn't matter. Actually, bhai, matlab, mera GMAT was not great, but I got a 100% scholarship from Wharton.
Oh, okay.
So, and people say that Wharton is a finance school, GMAT, this, that, GMAT ke bina to hoga nahi. Aisa nahi hota hai.
So I didn't know this. You've got offers from Harvard as well as Wharton.
Harvard.
And now you've chosen Harvard over Wharton. Any specific reason? Hi everyone, welcome to Conversation with Kushal once again. Today we have with us a person who has worked in like one of the top companies in the venture capital space, even in private equity prior to that, and in consulting. Like, it's a dream profile for all of us, and graduated from SRCC, worked at McKinsey, then Westbridge, then Softbank, and now she's getting into Harvard. Thank you so much, Sanchie, for coming here and guiding everyone. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks, Kushal, and thank you so much for taking the initiative to reach out. I have been following your channel for a while, but never thought I would show up one day. So thank you so much.
Oh, I'm glad that you're following the channel. I think like it's because of people like you who want to give back to the fraternity that the channel is growing gradually.
Awesome.
And special thanks to you. So maybe you can just give a quick introduction to everyone. What are you doing nowadays and what have you done in the past so that people get to know?
Sure. So hi everyone. Thanks for joining in and taking out time to listen to both of us. My name is Sanchie. I grew up in Patna, Bihar, and from there on my dream was to go into SRCC and take up business as a career. So I completed my business bachelor's in commerce from Shri College of Commerce back in 2018. In those 3 years, I was mostly involved in social entrepreneurship. I'll talk about that in detail when I sort of cover my SRCC journey, post which I wanted to do consulting because I loved problem solving. At the same time, I wanted to look at different types of businesses and see, and brainstorm with the people in that industry. So I went on to join McKinsey and company for about a year and a half. Learned a lot across different industries where I had zero clue how they even look like. So like I worked at oil and gas, I worked in pharma and steel. Beyond that, I was more interested to do a little bit of more financial side of things, look at the P&L view of businesses. Hence, I joined Westbridge Capital. Perfect place for me to join at the start of my career because I had zero clue about how public investing, private investing, early stage, late stage, like what is the real difference between all these 4 or 5 types of investing. And Westbridge was one place which was the perfect place because that does everything, right? So I could there figure out that I'm more aligned towards tech growth stage investing on the private side, and that's when Softbank opportunity came around after about 14-16 months at Westbridge. I decided to join Softbank. Been here for about 2 years now, heading to HBS for my MBA for the next 2 years. Happy to answer any questions that you think people will have.
Sure. Thank you so much for such a granular introduction. Just for everyone, like HBS is Harvard Business School where she's getting into, and it's the top 3 business school across the globe. I think top 3 or top 5, right? Like
top 1.
I
would like to believe it's number 1, but sure.
It's the number 1. I think last time when I was back in 2020, when I was thinking of doing an MBA, I was just looking at the rankings. So there are like various websites like Stanford, Harvard, Wharton. I think these are just in top 5, top 3 kind of schools. So let's discuss about your childhood, and let's discuss how did your schooling and college help you in order to hone your personality, and how did that help you in your graduation or in your day-to-day work profile?
Yeah, so I think how I grew up as a child really decided where I will end up in life. And like, let me just give you a little bit of context on, I come from a very middle class family back in Patna, zero exposure to really how the globe operates. My parents, both of them have done their 12th. I was the first generation student. Basically, I was the first one to complete and even think about bachelor's. So my parents are, my mom's a housewife, my dad is a businessman. I think most of my determination and most of my perseverance comes from my dad. He made sure that, I was the first child in the family. I have a younger sibling. He made sure that I perform academically really well, because that he believed was the reason why I would actually break the shackle of, being in this middle class sort of a family and whatever, doing something for myself. So since the very beginning, he focused a lot on my academics. That's why I probably missed on a lot of extracurriculars, by the way. But I think I was always inspired to be like a top-notch student. In 12th grade, I think I was, again, very, very academically driven student. In 12th grade, when I decided I want to do SRCC, and then when I got into SRCC, I made it a point on day one that this is actually the life where I get to choose between extracurriculars and curriculars, right? So I probably split it as 80% of extracurriculars and 20% of curriculars, because honestly BCom Honors was not a very extensive course, especially if you've done 11th and 12th in commerce. So it's like first year actually is just 11th and 12th, a little bit of more on top of the 11th and 12th curriculum. So I think I spent 80% of time doing co-curriculars. In that, there was this society called Enactus in our college. It's a social entrepreneurship institution, student run. What essentially social entrepreneurship means is, like, there are people who believe in solving social problems through charity, and then there are people who believe in making business models around social problems which are more sustainable. So I was, I aligned myself to the latter thought, and then I worked on this project called Project Asba, which is basically bringing water to rural slums and urban slums, right? So I was very clear that the impact has to be what is going to drive this business model. And we failed like miserably in the first 6 months of our pilot. Of course, like the team was down, like we were just like, I didn't go to college for 2 months because I was just like, no, I can't show my face because the project has failed so bad. We could not even, I think, manage to generate a revenue of about 80,000 in like 2-3 months. So we decided to completely change the project. Then we established community RO plants across these regions, and funding was a huge problem because every community RO plant required about 12 lakhs. And like as a student-run organization, arranging 12 lakhs at a scale is like huge. But we said we'll start. So we did the crowdfunding. We went to like every flat and asked for like even $20, right? And somehow we could gather like about 8 lakhs out of this crowdfunding campaign. We went to the government, the local government, and luckily we got that support. So we got the land, slashed our cost because we got our electricity and water supply. So the cost was about 8 lakhs in the end. And then we could establish our first plant, and that became like a model for people to replicate. And eventually we expanded across 4 states. Project Asba was invited by the Prime Minister. So like I think the entire idea of me trying to do something very different from what I had done for the first 18 years of my life determined that I actually want to build my personality and not really just be academically focused. So there were a lot of friends of mine who were doing a lot of extra courses, like of course CPT, CA. There would be people who were doing CFA. There were people who were preparing for their MBA, and I was sort of giving all my time to Enactus. So I think that was a tough call. In hindsight, it worked out, but it would have probably not been like, I would not be where I am if I wouldn't have done that. So I was clear that CA, CPT, CFA, I can do it at any point in time. I always wanted to give my personality a shot. So I think that really determined a lot of things for me. Post which I think this is where I realized I really, really wanted to do consulting, because it was like problem, go for it, crack it, and then try and figure out what's the solution. That was exactly what I was doing in Enactus. And trying to, I think also like simplify complicated problems was something that I liked. A problem that involved a lot of stakeholders like government, NGOs, business. So like for example, we started tapping into CSR funds because that was one of the ways in which we could get funding very easily. So like how to deal with corporates. Very early on, I had a business card because Enactus gives you like a business card, business diary. It actually runs like an organization. So very early on, I got a flavor of how corporate also works, right? So I think that fueled the idea of me getting into corporate. And yeah, that's how.
So Enactus is like a committee at SRCC?
Yeah, so it's basically a global student-run organization. Think of this as, if you know ISEC, it's basically like that, right? It's a student-run organization. It's an independent body. So it's not just a society. Like for example, a lot of colleges would have like a commerce society, economic society run by students, but it's very different from that because it's actually an organization. So there are like these college chapters of Enactus that they have across good colleges in India. So like for example, in Delhi University, there would be Enactus, SRCC, there would be Enactus, LSR, Enactus, Hansraj. So each of these Enactus colleges, they are Enactus teams are running their own projects.
Got it.
So they run their own projects. There is a Enactus national championship that happens across the country, then international championship that happens mostly in California. So you go and present your project, try to win that grant. But I think everyone who's in Enactus is not really driven by the fact that there's a grant at the end of it. It's actually the impact. Like today when I go back and look at the plant still working, like we could establish about 15 plants now, and the project is still going on. Whenever you go to these plants and see the people there, I think it's just the smile that drives you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what would your advice be for anyone? Like, there's a trade-off where if let's say you're giving time to committees like Enactus, then you won't be able to focus on academics, or you won't be able to do those courses. What would be your advice? How should people prioritize these two things, and how can they also be a part of all these activities which are there?
So I think in life you'll always have this choice, right? Like you'll always have a choice to make between your personal life, your work life, your time that you want to give to your curriculars, extracurriculars. So I think it's about, and again, there's nothing wrong or right about prioritizing one over the other. I think the idea is what really matters to you at that point in time. So for example, I knew that I have to have good grades by the end of 4th semester for me to be able to get shortlisted at McKinsey, because if my target was McKinsey, then I needed to have a 9-pointer, like at least an 8.5 pointer, right? So I was just like, I cannot completely ignore my studies, but is there a way to sort of, like bypass the regular class going but still do well? And that's what you had to figure out. So like for example, I figured that of course attendance was a compulsion in college, but like we also used to get attendance benefits. So if you did like something for Enactus, you used to get attendance benefits, because even the teachers and the college recognizes that that really develops your personality, and it's important as like a extracurricular course that you do. So I feel like at that point in time, first semester, I focused a lot on studies, because Enactus also takes time to little like pick up, because your first year in Enactus is more about being a junior and learning things from your seniors. Second year, I couldn't focus at all, and I was okay with that, because first year, I would probably say that I did like pretty well, gave like a 50% split to both Enactus. Also, first year, you have lots of other societies to handle, because the way it works in SRCC is that you go in, you get to be a part of, of course you recruit for societies. It's not like you get to a part of every society, but at the end of it, let's say you have 5 societies. आप सारे में post नहीं ले सकते in second year. So second year is when you get to prioritize depending on your performance also. कि आप किस में you'll become a director, you'll become a president, you'll become like what are you really becoming in that particular society. In second year, I dropped off every other society except for Enactus, because it would have been impossible to manage Enactus with studies and with like other societies. I think that's when people get FOMO, because they're like, oh my god, first year I had 5 certificates, second year I don't even have one. So I feel like the important thing is quality over quantity, and that has actually again driven a lot of my decisions in life, whether you do something deep versus like wide. So I believe like in getting that expertise and getting that specialization in something. So I feel like it was probably an easier choice for me, because I was very clear I want to just be with one but do that very properly. So like Project Asba was actually one of the most successful projects that Enactus SRCC has run, and that actually just speaks for itself. So I feel like
in order to get into SRCC, you need to have a very stellar profile in your 10th and 12th, right? How much percentage does it require?
Yeah, so basically I think now it's changed, but in my time it was
when
completely...
was this? Which year?
When I was getting in, this was 2015.
Okay.
So 2015 mein the way it used to work was it was completely determined by your 12th grade. Aapka 12th mein, the board exam that happens in the end, what is your percentage? That time the percentage was 97.3 and I barely made it.
How much did you score?
97.5.
Okay.
So I think it's about really like making that cut off at that point in time. Uske alawa kuch doesn't really matter. But what happens post that is essentially now what they've done is there's this common entrance exam that they've transformed this entire admission process to, where people from across the country would take the test, and that test will determine which college you get. So think of this as like how NEET used to happen, or how this medical exams used to happen, right? Like you get the colleges basis your rank. तो वैसा कर दिया उन्होंने.
Similar to CAT for MBAs.
Yes, similar to CAT for MBAs, except there's no interview.
Yeah, okay.
The other thing is that, and the reason why this has happened is because again, they also understand, and like what happens was there used to be a cutoff across boards which was similar, right? So like for example, if they have taken out the cutoff of 97.5, now there will be a lot of people from state boards जिसमें they are disadvantaged because they are like यार हमारे board में तो number ही नहीं देते लोग, right? CBSE would be like okay fine fair, but ICSE probably is more they give more numbers in like 12th standard. Pehle thoda strict hote hain, but 12th is easier, is what I've heard. I came from CBSE, so I caveat that if I'm wrong. But essentially, it just puts each other into like, like different disadvantaged and advantaged buckets. So they wanted to remove that out and take like a common exam to get into bachelor. So now it's changed a little.
Got it. No, makes sense. And in SRCC, like, what has been one of the funniest incidents or maybe one of the craziest thing you've done at the college, or probably you remember that and you're like, oh yeah, this is something which I'm proud of, or something?
So I'm not proud of something which was crazy, by the way.
Okay.
So there are it's actually two questions, craziest and something that I'm proud of. So I think proud of question I've almost covered. Of course, I'm proud of Enactus and ASBA and the work I did there. Funniest and craziest moments in SRCC is actually the college fest, which is called Crossroads. It's actually one of the most crazy time in college because the college transforms into like a very, very magical playland for like 3 days. You'll have like very good musical artists play. So like in our year, we had Farhan Akhtar, Shankar Ehsaan Loy, Mohit Chauhan. So I think what happens is like literally people forget about everything else, and there are like thousands and thousands of students just dancing and like having the fun of their lives. Like, and it's inter-college, so like people will come from different colleges, you'll have fun. Then there are these competitions that keep running in parallel. So there's something called Business Conclave, which happens in my college. So I think the good thing about SRCC in general is it's not a school. So like everyone is allowed to do whatever they want to do and whatever they want to run. So like I also did a lot of these quick 2 to 3 week campaigns, which was like winter cloth collection drive. So it was called Spread the Warmth. Then I did plastic jam, which was like collecting plastic across and then replacing that with, bartering that with. So I did a plastic and plant barter. So all of those kind of things you're open to do. And it just develops a lot of these, very, very different personality traits in you of a leader, of something you start thinking more. So I feel like Crossroads is one of the best times in college. The student union is completely responsible for driving it. Again, I had a choice between Students Union and Enactus. I chose Enactus, but I'm sure Students Union like puts in the best of their efforts to make that happen, and it's one of the best festivals in Delhi University.
Got it. So you have been like super enthusiastic since your childhood itself, or after getting into SRCC doing so many things at the same time?
No, I think I was always an extrovert.
Okay.
Always liked meeting people, very chatty as a person.
Okay. So, but not on social media.
So not on social media. Okay. I'm very like dormant on social media, but in person I think I've always been like this.
Got it.
Always wanted to keep my like legs in like 5 boards. So always.
Good. So let's talk about your post SRCC journey now. So after SRCC, then you have campus placements.
Yeah.
Once you're graduated from BCom honors. So how many companies usually come? Where do you apply? How does that process happen, and how do you prepare for that?
Yeah. So again, SRCC is again one of the good colleges known for its placement record. I mean, I'm sure in terms of number of companies that come, there would be somewhere in the range of 40 to 50 at least. The batch size in SRCC is about 600, which would basically be about 450 BCom and 150 economics every year. So like about 1800 students. But the third year is when you get placed, about 600 people, 60 companies. And then basically what happens is, companies are divided into different categories, right? So there would be category A, B, C, D. I don't know if it's changed. It's changed like from the time I recruited, but essentially they divide themselves. They divide these companies basis their package, and then there are rules like if you get into a category B, then you can no more sit for a category C. If you get into any category A, then you can't sit. So there are these trade-offs that you have to make, whether to sit for category A and like which category A company do you really apply for, because even if you make it to the category A company which was last on your list, you won't be able to get even like interview at the first, because even within category there are companies, right, and there are preferences. So I feel like it's again a very like gamified tough process. What happens is consulting companies come first. There are these, and this happens around August every year. They release their results by September end. The process of recruiting in a consulting company is basically like they will start by your CV shortlist. Very few people get shortlisted, and that's where the majority of the cuts happen. So in our batch, only like 10 or 11 people got shortlisted for McKinsey out of a batch of like 600, assuming 500 would have applied, right? Like 100 people don't want to apply because they're going for MBAs or whatever. So assuming 500 apply, about 10 people make it to the shortlist. Your shortlist actually is driven by your grades. 100% you have to be top 1% of that grade pool. Secondly, what have you really done in college? So if you just have studies on your CV, then probably you will not make the cut. So that was another reason why I was very sure I want to do something very, very impactful apart from studies. And then what leadership position have you held? Have you held for, like, let's say in your second year? The other thing is there are these campus internships that you do in second year. That also determines your shortlist, because if, let's say, you've been placed on campus even during internship, they know that you are a good candidate who got filtered through a competitive process. So I think on-campus internships take precedence over off-campus internships. And then once your CV shortlist happens, they call you in their office and they take interviews. Interviews में 2-3 round होते हैं for the first day. So it's a 2-day process. First day आपके 3 rounds होंगे. You will mostly be meeting EMs who are essentially your project leader equivalent, EMs and then APs who are 1+1 EM, right?
Yeah, can you just tell everyone what are EMs and EPs?
Yeah, so essentially the way consulting hierarchy works, especially in McKinsey, is there are these business analysts who are your entry-level analysts, post which you will become an associate for about 2 years. So business analyst program is about a 3-year program. Then you become 2 year of associate, post which you will become engagement manager, which is your EM, again 2 to 3 years depending on your performance. Then you become an associate partner, which is AP, and then you make it to a partner and then managing partner. So this is the hierarchy typically. Every consulting firm would name every level differently, like BCG calls EM a PL, which is a project leader, or like they call an associate a consultant, if I'm not wrong. So I think it's basically like different companies have different layers, but in terms of the number of steps to get to MD, it's the same. So you will typically meet EMs and APs on day 1. They will give you cases. आपको case prep करना पड़ता है. That is a very tedious process. Takes about at least 15 to 20 days before you sit for your interview. I'll talk about that in detail. And then once you have that, you make it to your second day, where your partners and senior partners do the same thing. So they take your case round, and then there's a little bit of HR element involved in those interviews, because they also want to check whether you're fit for the job or not, whether you're fit for the culture or not. And then once you make it to the firm. In terms of the prep required in consulting, it's actually a heavy prep like process. So you have to do 2 to 3 things. One is guesstimates. Guesstimates is about estimating a certain thing. Now this might not be that, like, they're not really looking for the answer. So like if I tell you, Kushal, how will you estimate the revenue of Delhi Metro in a day? Like they're not really looking कि अच्छा तुमने 5 लाख नहीं बोल के 10 लाख बोला. Like it's not the answer that matters, is actually the approach, how you really think about it. Okay, so do you really think about, okay, number of trains into number of routes into average, or do you think about from a demand side, अच्छा इतने number of लोग हैं दिल्ली में, population इतना है, इतने लोग metro लेते होंगे, इतना AOV है, इतने time travel करते होंगे. Like how do you really think about it? Demand से सोचते हो, supply से सोचते हो? Are you able to think through both ways and then triangulate a good answer? That's essentially estimates, right? So one part of this entire consulting process is how do you guesstimate, and it's a very important part of a consultant's job, because like for example, you will be in situations where a client would ask you to estimate the market size for this product, because before launching they want to know even, you know, कि VAS का market India में बड़ा है भी कि नहीं. So how do you really start from scratch and try and understand अच्छा VAS का market वो कैसे estimate करेंगे, right? So that's one. The second thing is that then you have a full-fledged case, which again are like 4-5 types of cases. It's a long distant memory, but let me try and recall. So there's profitability case, which is basically to understand, जैसे मैं आपको केस दूंगी कि अच्छा मैकडॉनल्ड्स का प्रॉफिट आज कम हो रहा है, क्यों हो रहा है, like just simple question, right? And then you have to continue to keep asking me questions. As an interviewer, I'll keep giving you answers and seeing कि तुम क्या question पूछते हो, right? Like again, the thought process matters and the structure matters. That were you like, there's this framework in McKinsey, it's called MICE, which is mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. So were you really MICE in your approach, where you were like, हाँ मैंने अच्छे से bucket में divide किया, and all these buckets together are an exhaustive answer, right? So profitability cases होते हैं, market entry cases होते हैं. तो basically तुम ऐसे cases, there are these case books. Content की कमी नहीं है. is just about whether you're effectively completing that content or not. And when I say effectively, the answer is not to sit and read case books. That's the worst mistake you can make. It's actually just having a group of 4 to 5 friends, like literally sitting like this and just sitting and be like, अच्छा आप estimate करो मेरा electricity bill कितना आता होगा, right? Or estimate the market for vases in India, or estimate how much time will it take for you to go from here to Worli, like literally like that. So बैठ के सिर्फ ऐसे हमने 2 महीने as our friends group, like we were 5 of us, literally we've just discussed this, and there were questions which was very funny also. Estimate the number of leaves on this tree. Right? But it just develops your thought process. It just tells you, okay, estimate the number of people playing cricket at this point in time in India. So how do you think about all these things, right? Similarly, cases भी वैसे ही होते हैं. बैठते हो तुम pen paper लेके and you just ask your friends, okay, fine, what do you want me to do today? And then you just start from scratch and pick up a case and do it. And then always keep an observer who tells you whether you asked right question or not, whether you faltered, whether you were like at any point in time seeming less confident. So all of those kind of things really matter. I think your friends help you a lot at that point in time. My friends did. And then of course, it goes, you will tank a few interviews. It's okay. I tanked a lot. And then of course I made it to McKinsey. So I think it's like a little bit of practice, a little bit of confidence, and don't ignore the HR part of things. Most people do. They do ask you the fit questions that you need, like why do you want to do consulting? Are you really thinking about consulting in the right way or not, is what they want to figure out.
Got it. So let's do an activity if you're okay with that. So I'll ask you, estimate the electricity bill of my house, and let's see what kind of questions do you ask and what is the final number you get at.
Yeah, so I don't think, again, the final number doesn't matter, but the way to estimate that would be like, the way I would go about this is in 2 ways, right? One is, first of all, you need to understand the time period. कि आपको electricity bill कितने दिन का चाहिए? मतलब आपको एक week का estimate करके दूँ मैं, या एक महीने का करके दूँ? ठीक है, 1 month.
In the month of April 2023.
Perfect. So now that the second question would be, okay, how many hours do you spend at home? Right? Because let's say you are a working population, तो आप बाहर रहोगे तो मेरा
I work for 12 hours a day from my office, and the remaining 12 hours I'm at home.
So 12 hours every day. Now then the second question I'll ask you is, okay, fine. Third question would be that आपके घर में appliances क्या हैं, because that will determine your load, right? So then you'll say, अच्छा ठीक है, मेरे घर में 2 BHK है, 2 AC है, एक fridge होगा, एक washing machine hoga, and then typical lights and fans, right? So now there are 2 ways of doing this. One is you say, ठीक है, I know in my house it's exactly almost the same. Then you'll ask कि कौन से electricity company आपका electricity connection दे रही है, right? So मेरे में महानगर है, which is cheaper, but I know if it is Reliance and Adani for you, it's higher, right? So I would know, ठीक है, मेरा typical consumption, if you are actually an average consumption person, your electricity bill, at least mine, ranges between 3,500 to 6,000, anywhere between that, depending on, again, the usage that my flatmates do and I do. If you live alone or you live with parents, that's also a thing, right?
I live with flatmates.
So you live with flatmates, again, similar working profile, I'm assuming, 12 hours. So roughly आपका, depending, again, कौन से electricity connection है आपकी?
Reliance.
हाँ, so Reliance is expensive. So it will at least be 1.5 times higher than mine. So at least आपका 10,000 का bill आता होगा, right?
Wow.
So that's essentially the idea. That's it.
That was a good one. So ठीक है, 12,000 होता है. But I mean, yeah, you were quite close to that. This was very fun actually. I've been asked. So I was giving my interviews at BCG and I was asked like questions on these guesstimates and all. I mean, I was asked one question: estimate the number of golf balls in India in air, like in air right now. हवा में कितने golf balls हैं? And I was like, I mean, क्या है यार, ये क्या question है? मतलब,
so
I mean,
exactly, as I told you, right? Number of people playing cricket is very random, right? Like आपको सोचना पड़ेगा, अच्छा ये इंडिया का पॉपुलेशन है, इसमें इतने बच्चे खेल रहे होंगे अभी, क्योंकि अभी स्कूल टाइम है. Like you have to also ask whether it's a Sunday 2 p.m. or a Monday 2 p.m. Like when do you really want me to estimate the number of golf balls or like cricket balls, right? So that is the idea. I think it's just about क्या factors आप consider करते हो, whether it's a Sunday, whether it's a Monday.
You know, like interestingly, so when I was preparing for BCG interviews, although I did not get in the final rounds, but at least it has taught me in order to how to observe things. So for example, if I'm going in a mall, okay, and I'll be like, when I was giving my interviews back then, I was like, अरे इस पे भी एक question आ सकता है, estimate the number of stores which are there in an Infinity Mall in Andheri Lokhandwala, something of these lines. And my mindset was like, अरे किस पे भी कुछ भी question आ सकता है यार, literally.
That is the good thing, and that's what consulting teaches you, and that's why it's actually one of the best careers to have at the start of your career, because it actually makes you a very well-rounded person. बहुत thought process develop कर देता है आपका, more importantly than just answers.
Right. So what are like some of the skills that you developed at McKinsey, and if you can talk about some of your projects which you can disclose in terms of what was the case, how did you solve that case, how was your entire experience, that'll be very helpful for people to understand.
Okay, ठीक है. So what all skills I developed, let me take that answer, let me take that question first. So I think there are 3 things that come to my mind and they stand out really well. First is 100% problem solving. And problem solving meaning complex problem solving. It's not that कि अच्छा profit बढ़ाना है तो कैसे बढ़ाना है, and then you can think about 5 things. In real businesses, it's not that simple, right? There would be stakeholders, there would be repercussions of doing X versus Y. Like even right now in the tech market, like there's so many layoffs. Everyone's focused towards profitability, but layoffs are also going to happen and have a very different impact that you can't even think of sitting outside of the business outlines, right? So I feel like how do you solve complex problems and how do you structure and simplify every piece is something that was very important. Came very handy even during my time at investing. Second is communication, presentation, because this is actually your day-to-day job. Like, and this involves both written, oral, and like non-verbal communication also with the client, right? Like, how do you present yourself? How do you convince the person who's 25, 30 years more experienced than you to listen to you, to share data with you, and to come across as a credible consultant? मतलब तुम imagine करो यार, like that person is there in that industry for 25-30 years, you come out of a graduate school and try and tell them कि आप इतने साल से जो कर रहे हो वो गलत कर रहे हो, इसको ऐसे करो. Now, how do you convince that person is something that you really learn the convincing skills, the fact that you make your presence felt in the room, come across as a presentable and very nice communicator is very important. And third is just how do you build connections. And I feel like that's very important again because it's not a job that can be done in silos. It actually requires you to be on site on the client's in the client's office, be with a team, and also cherish those friendships and relationships that you've built across the years, right? So very hardly will you get an opportunity to be in the same room as the CEO and present to the CEO as to what he should do, right? And that consulting gives you, and that also then gives you a leeway into their life. And we're like, acha, theek hai, abhi now when I know the CEO and I've added some value to his life, can I be in touch with this person for as long as I want, right? So it also makes you that that person who probably likes to cherish network. Again, it's a very personality trait driven thing. Maybe some people might not want to, but it gives you that opportunity, which I sort of leveraged on. So I feel like those 3 things really is what consulting teaches you.
Got it. Yeah.
And case, so I can't take the name of the client,
of course.
But maybe one of the most interesting cases that I did was increasing oil production at an oil and gas client. Now, the reason why it was interesting, just to give you a context, was this was my first case in McKinsey. The longest I've been on a case, so usually a case would last between 3 to 5 months. I was on this case for 9 months. The client hated me at the start, then they didn't get me rolled off because then they were like, nahi, abhi to Sanchie chahiye. So I felt like I had traveled quite a distance on that case. And the 4th thing was that it was a sector I had never thought I will look at.
Yeah, it sounds boring prima facie. I don't know why you're saying interesting.
Yeah, and also dude, like I was a commerce student. मैं क्या oil and gas, मेरे को अभी आप formula पूछोगे oil and gas का क्या, oil का क्या होता है, I don't know यार. मतलब it was completely a first principles case. Like how do you solve a case or solve something which you have zero clue about? You need to learn how to live in that ambiguity. That's another thing that consulting teaches you, right? So I feel like I had बहुत हाथ पैर मारने पड़े थे मेरे को उस केस में to prove my mettle. And some of the best friendships I have today is because of that. Now, what was interesting was that if you typically just imagine, think of an oil and gas, and that's how I understood the case. Think of an oil and gas field as एक पानी का ग्लास है, उसमें एक स्पॉन्ज लगा है, right? And there is a straw. That's all there is in an oil and gas. पानी के ग्लास में that is your oil. Sponge is basically the upstream equipment where like, the straw is the upstream equipment that pulls it, and sponge is where the oil gets collected, and that's where you can pull it from, right? Now the idea is to understand whether and oil production बढ़ाना है आपको, तो इसमें कितना कुछ हो सकता है. क्या तो आप बोलोगे कि यार तुम digging ही गलत जगह कर रहे हो, तुम्हारा यहाँ पे पानी है ही नहीं, तुम फालतू का वहाँ स्ट्रॉ डाले जा रहे हो. सेकेंड इज स्पॉन्ज में कुछ प्रॉब्लम है. थर्ड तुम्हारे स्ट्रॉ में कुछ प्रॉब्लम है. फोर्थ क्या है कि स्टोरेज, तो दिस इज अपस्ट्रीम. The midstream is when you like store and like process that oil, because oil in its crude form can't be used. So there petroleum banega, ye sab banega. So that is the midstream, and then downstream is when you've sorted things out, you sort of channel it out to like, अच्छा ये petrol के लायक है, ये jelly बनेगा, इसका petroleum jelly बनेगा, ये बनेगा, whatever, like different things, right? That's your downstream. So this client was an upstream client, which was responsible for production. The issue was that they thought that their infrastructure ka problem is in the storage. And they wanted to increase, like invest about 100 million capex in just increasing the storage, because उनको लगा कि हम storage नहीं कर पा रहे, production capacity तो बहुत है. But problem वहाँ नहीं थी, problem actually आपके straw में थी, right? Problem आपके straw में थी कि यार आपका number of straws is है ही नहीं, मतलब जितना होना चाहिए वहाँ पे है ही नहीं. And that was the issue, the blockage, there were blockages in the straw, and I've dumped the case down for you guys. It was not as simple, but just to like give everyone this context who's not belonging to this industry, I think that's what consultant does to you. Like it just looks at the data from an outside in perspective and tells you कि यार आप data ही गलत देख रहे हो. Like even if you're so experienced at production, maybe you're not that good at just getting data analysis done right? So that's the idea, and it took us 6 months to just convince the client कि आप गलत जगह invest कर रहे हो यार, मतलब this is not right. Of course you need to increase your storage capacity. There was a blockage in the storage capacity also, but the major thing is here. The major thing is not in the storage capacity.
Got it.
It was quite interesting. Clients were like a piece of work to handle. 6 months तो मतलब किसी ने किसी की नहीं सुनी. Everyone was also like, you also learn how to deal with egos, because you're like, यार ये कहाँ से लोग आ गए हैं, हमें बताएंगे क्या करना है, हम तो इतने साल से कर रहे हैं, CEO सर पागल हो गए हैं, कहाँ से ले आए हैं, क्यों लाए हैं, दिन सर पे बैठा दिया है, लाके दिन रात डेटा मांगते रहते हैं. That's the first conversation that happens around your team. So from there you have to convince them to be like, नहीं, listen to us boss, like we are there to help, we are a team. वो समझाना ही बहुत मुश्किल होता है उनको.
It's as good as a statutory auditor going in a bank or going in a going in a company.
उनको लगता है यार
these
audit
people think यार audit यार क्यों ही कर रहे हैं,
right? तुम generally top management के लिए काम करते हो as consultant, but तुमको काम तो middle management के साथ करना है, तो you can't just mess up your relationship with them also.
Makes sense. How long were you at McKinsey?
14 months.
Okay, got it. And then you shifted to Westbridge.
I shifted to Westbridge, yes.
Correct. And how was the Westbridge interview different from your McKinsey interview?
कुछ नहीं आता था मुझे Westbridge interview में.
So, well, I mean, in a private equity interview, I've heard like a lot of my friends who are working at different companies. Some of them have also gotten 10 rounds of interview, more than 10 rounds, and each round is of 30 minutes or 1 hour, depending on what kind of questions are asked. How was it for you at Westbridge, and how was it different from the McKinsey?
Yeah, so in all honesty, Westbridge was probably the 5th interview I was giving at a private equity fund. उसके पहले मैंने 4 बहुत बुरे तरह से मैसअप कर दिए थे, but the good thing about my life has been that I generally don't give up too soon.
Oh wow,
so
that's a very like, good trait actually. So you were rejected by 4 private equity funds?
I was rejected by 4 private equity, but पूरी मेरी गलती थी, because I was, so see, consulting skills are very different from what private equity needs. Private equity would be more Excel, more working in silos, not really communication से फर्क नहीं पड़ता उतना starting में as an analyst. They look at you more like whether you will be able to work like a machine on a machine. Right, like Excel बना पाओगे कि नहीं, 3 statement model, modeling कैसे सोचते हो, projections के बारे में कैसे सोचते हो, pages बनाने आते हैं कि नहीं तुम्हें, PPTs बनाने आते हैं कि नहीं, all of those kind of things come into play. Do you follow businesses? So I think, how do you look at a P&L from a macro perspective? So ये सब skill set बहुत ज़्यादा McKinsey में नहीं सीखते हो तुम. तो it took me 4 interviews to figure out that, oh, I lacked XYZ. And that's why these guys didn't select me, right? Like, I made it a point to take feedback from all these 4. I'm still in touch with the people who rejected me, by the way.
Oh, wow.
So I feel like...
That's not so common thing, but yeah.
Yeah, because they will actually tell you where you messed up, right? And if they tell you, हाँ, तुम्हारा modeling skills खराब था, then you know, okay, fine, next interview में मुझे modeling सीख के जाना है थोड़ा सा, right? And again, no one expects you to be 100% there, but at least यार आपको 70-80% तो रहना पड़ेगा. So I think first 4 interviews I messed up. 5th was Westbridge, and with Westbridge I was interviewing with 2 other funds. That round I got 3 offers, all 3. Because I made it like, again, from the 4 mistakes of my life, I learned how to convert 3 offers then. The interview, how it goes is, as you rightly said, the teams in private equity and venture capitals are very, very small in India. 6 to 7, max to max 10 would be like a typical average size, at least in a private equity. Because the teams are small, everyone wants to make sure that you will be able to fit with them in the fund, so everyone meets you. Westbridge में तो मेरे से analyst ने भी interview किया था मेरे को, right? So my co-analyst also interviewed me. So it's like saying कि तुमको सबके साथ थोड़ा gel up हो पाओगे कि नहीं, they check that apart from your technical skills, which is very different in consulting, because consulting में 3000 लोग हैं यार, तुम सबके साथ तो gel up नहीं होगे, you figure out your people eventually. But यहाँ पे छोटी team होती है. Secondly, like are you really like a math and a number and a business person? Like, so math number is one, second is your business, right? So business is just, अगर मैं आपको कोई number ना दूँ और आपको सिर्फ बोलूँ यार, how do you think about ride sharing market in India, or how do you think about food delivery in India? तुमको कोई number नहीं दिया मैंने, ठीक है? तुम कैसे सोचते हो इस business को? Like, how do you think about it? Okay, ठीक है, ज़रूरी भी है कि नहीं, ये 10-minute delivery is picking up these days, right? Is it really important? Should people really allocate capital to these businesses? So like, how do you think about fundamentally come out of that Excel and think about go diligence? जैसे हम अभी diligence कर रहे थे एक company, like literally go to these properties to diligence, हाँ कि कैसा दिखता है, not just Excel, right? So I think that is the interesting part of a private equity job, and that's what Westbridge was checking. First round at Westbridge I had on that time, COVID was 2020. No, so that time I did it in person only. They first did the CV shortlist, then they had 2 rounds of interview on phone. Then I was given a case study. Now this case study can be different for different funds, but my case study was basically evaluating Aakash versus Vedantu or Rapido versus Bounce. So I had to choose which one do I want to do. So I did Aakash versus Vedantu. And then why would one succeed over the other, and at what valuation will you invest? So I think धीरे धीरे आप सीख जाते हो. उस टाइम तक जब मैंने 4 interviews मैं सब कर दिए थे, तब तक मैं learned how to do this. So I figured and made a deck of about 5-6 pages, made a quick model. Westbridge didn't expect me to make a very detailed model. Quick model, and sent it out to them. Once they sort of see the case study and they like it, then they ask you to present it to the team. So मेरा उस टाइम क्या हुआ कि they changed it a little bit, so the entire team wasn't available. So I directly met Sandeep. Sandeep was the MD, Sandeep Singhal, super smart guy. I went to his cabin and all he asked me was case study, right? Like pura case study, and then he tells me in the middle of the interview, walks out. And I was like, oh my God, like, did I say something which is wrong? What is going on? He walks out and then comes back and said, why don't you sit with Sanchit, who's another analyst? He's done the Vedantu deal, and try and convince him that Vedantu is a better deal or Aakash is a better deal. Like, why don't you debate this out with him, and I'll take your feedback from Sanchit. Okay. So he did first half. He figured कि शायद कुछ substance है. इस ऐसा नहीं है कि she doesn't know what she's saying. And then he made me sit with Sanchit. Sanchit asked me all the questions possible. Very close friend now, going for his wedding. But like that time I was intimidated, right? Like I was like, oh my God, like senior analyst, pata nahi kya chahta hai, what is like really like the thing that I might just mess up or whatever. Super helpful, did that. Then he took his feedback. And then post which I met Deepak, who was the principal. I met other VPs, Aditya Agarwal, Rahul Agarwal. I met these people, and then once I think 4 or 5 interviews later, then it becomes like meeting everyone. So you will get a sense 4 or 5 interviews later that they are making you meet everyone for meeting or for really interviewing. Because 4 or 5 interviews later, like though I had 2-3 more rounds of interviews, they were not really interviews. They were like, "Acha, Westbridge क्यों join करना चाहते हो?" They are telling me about Westbridge, their deals. Happy to reach out. Are you okay to move to Bangalore? Like these are kind of things they will tell you, and then you're like,
typical HR questions, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's how it worked. But in other private equity firms, it was almost similar: 2-3 rounds of cold technical interview, then a modeling test, and then presentation.
So what exactly you did in the Vedantu versus Aakash modeling kind of a test? Like you projected their revenues, profits,
so there are
what,
2-3 ways. I mean, 2-3 major things, and not without getting into a lot of details. Basically, they expect a deck and they expect a model. Deck में क्या होता है कि आप usually 5 से 6 पन्ने बनाते हो. एक आपका एक overview होगा, business overview कि अच्छा वेदांतु क्या करता है, आकाश क्या करता है, how are they different fundamentally. दूसरा होगा financials कि how is Vedantu P&L different from an Aakash P&L, and fundamentally why, do you understand that or not. Third would your projections, which will essentially be an output from your Excel. where you take some assumptions for the next 5 years and be like, okay, ठीक है, आज इसका revenue X है, तो ये कहाँ तक जा सकता है, margin अगर Y percentage है, तो वो Y percentage कहाँ तक जा सकता है, so you project that out, put that output in your third page. Fourth page I made was your recommendation page and your valuation page. Now, this is where a little bit of your experience comes into play, I would say. So what I did was I spoke to a few people who had looked at edtech before. Now, what multiple to use at exit कि अच्छा ठीक है, मतलब 10x revenue लगाना है कि 5x revenue लगाना है is like a very very industry thing also. तो तुमने revenue 100 project किया, तुम बोल रहे हो 5x revenue पे तुम exit कर सकते हो, तो तुम कैसे सोच रहे हो valuation? And then if it's 5x, then what do you enter at today to make a 25% IRR? So typical expectation in a private equity is about 25% IRR का, dollar IRR. उतना बन रहा है कि नहीं?
What do you mean by dollar IRR?
Yeah, so rupee IRR is when rupee keeps depreciating, right? Like historically depreciated at X percentage. So we take a 3% assumption, but of course it's depreciated a little bit more. So if you're making a rupee 30% IRR कि आज रुपी में डाल रहे हो, परसों रुपी में निकाल रहे हो, तो ठीक है. But अगर आज रुपी में डाल रहे हो at certain exchange rate and तुम निकालोगे भी डॉलर में at certain exchange rate, so तुम्हारा वो depreciation you have to take into account. So that's the difference. But yeah, that's essentially it. So then you say कि हाँ ठीक है 25% बन रहा है, so it looks like a good investment. आकाश में नहीं बनेंगे because of XYZ reason. And then fifth page was around what work did I do outside of Excel and PPT, right? So I would probably attach call notes. I did a quick survey, by the way, of people who were between 14 to 30 and also parents. Like two types of surveys. One was students 14 to 30 and the other was parents, to understand their mindset कि ये online education is really like a thing or सिर्फ faff है, right?
How did you reach out to these people?
Yeah, you have these groups, right? SRCC groups, McKinsey groups.
So these are people whom you know?
I don't know them personally, but these are like 200 का groups है, तो उसमें डाल दो, people will answer your
anyone
survey.
Who's willing
Anyone
to
who's willing to volunteer.
Okay.
Anyone who's willing to volunteer. You can put it on social media. उस time उतना active नहीं था. या था तो मैं नहीं थी active. So
you're not active now also.
yeah, fair. I take that feedback. So basically that, and then you get, so I got about 50 responses.
Oh, wow.
तो उससे भी आपको काफी वो हो जाता है कि you know, if you're saying that online is going to take off, then what really is also giving you that confidence? So then you say, हाँ यार, I've spoken to parents who are willing to give online education to their children. I've spoken to children who are actually willing to take things online. So then you can also prove that behavioral change हो रहा है sector में, तो online might take off, right? So then that's essentially the idea. You would also talk about nuances कि अच्छा online might take off in K-12 but online might not take off in competitive exams because that's where people are more result driven कि ओ Alan का बहुत अच्छा है, आकाश का बहुत अच्छा results है. So that was my answer कि if you focus on K-12, fair possibility है, but beyond K-12 I felt like maybe not, limited market for online, or like limited behavioral changes happened so far. That was my answer. Once that is done, yeah.
And how long were you at Westbridge?
16-18 months यार, exactly मेरे को ऐसे याद नहीं.
And Softbank how many months? So I'm just
Softbank 2 साल हो गया.
14 months, 16 months and 24 months. Okay, got it.
Softbank में 2 साल हो गया.
And like at Westbridge, so like once your interviews were done, then of course like for the next 14 months, you were looking at some sector or you were...
Well, that's a good thing about at least the VC firms I worked for and private equity firms I worked for. They don't tag you to a sector. So I was doing, my portfolio had consumer, airline, fintech, and I did a lot of these deals, which was, so I did an edtech deal, I did a B2B deal, and I also did a SaaS deal, investment. So I did 3 deals, but my portfolio had like a lot of other things also. So it's like, तुम एक एनालिस्ट के जैसे सब कुछ देखते हो. I looked at public market stocks also, right? So it's like, good thing about Westbridge was that of course like it gives you that wide spectrum of sectors and different styles of investing, and that I think is Westbridge is one of the actually rarer funds that gives you that opportunity. Got it.
So now then Westbridge is a private equity, Softbank is a growth investing, similar to
you can use like
equity.
this very interchangeably because now Westbridge has become more VC early stage. Growth also, so I think they have that flexibility to jump between private, public, late growth. So
I assume your interviews at Softbank would have been similar to what you were asked at Westbridge.
Very similar about your deals. This was a smaller team. In India, Softbank team only came around in like 2019, late 2019. So very new, recent team on ground. That time when I was recruiting, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them at that point in time, including Sumer and who's the head of the India team. So 6 at that point in time, we met all 6, plus there was an HR round by the HR. So 7 rounds of interview. Jisme 2 people took my modeling and case study together.
Got it.
So that was essential.
So as of now, how big is the team, SoftBank India team?
It's still, now we have 2 analysts who got hired, like one me and then the other one. So 2 of us, 2 VPs, 2 directors and 1 MD.
Okay, so 7-member team.
7-member team.
In India.
Yeah.
Got it.
7.
And how would your work profile or maybe the deals or work experience at SoftBank would be different from Westbridge?
Oh, super different.
Okay. Why do you
Very
say so?
different, yeah. So I think it's also a function of the stage you look at, right?
Yeah.
So in Westbridge, we never did, at least I personally never got a chance to do late stage growth. By that I mean Series C, D+. Also, like the SoftBank check sizes are much larger than Westbridge check sizes. So SoftBank would be typically 50 to 75 million. Westbridge would be around 25 to 30, at least at my time. So I think the approach at which you look at companies varies a lot, because the check size also sort of determines your valuation in some way, right? Because you're like, हाँ मेरे को इतना X percentage ownership चाहिए. SoftBank would typically look at less than 10%. So you would ideally want that company to be around, 700 to 800 sort of a valuation, versus Westbridge would typically look at companies at 150 to like 300 sort of. So the stage of the company changes a lot. So maturity of the founder, maturity of the team, maturity of the data that they give you is a lot different. The second thing is, I think it's also volume, the same thing, volume versus, how deep you go. So in Westbridge, when we were looking at deals, there was like huge volume of deals, because at the early stage or a typical early growth stage, you'll have lots of companies raising. But eventually the funnel becomes very, very small, right? So like at SoftBank, you would do like less number of deals a year, but you would do like large deals. Similarly, but at Westbridge, on the other hand, you would do more number of deals, but like smaller checks.
Got it.
So I think that is the approach which is very different from each other. Plus also the team, the way team is structured, everything's sort of very different. So I think the experience was, even though both are investing, I had like very different experiences. Westbridge, for example, the IC process of Westbridge is very different from the IC process of SoftBank. SoftBank has a global IC. Masa sits through every IC meeting, right? How do you convince Masa to meet the founder and then make sure that the deal goes through is like a skill that I learned here, versus like there, I think...
You met him?
I not met him in person.
Okay.
But yes, of course, we as analysts sit through the Zoom calls where the IC is, like we are presenting it to the IC. In Westbridge, it's like, तुमको sort of पता होता है ये deal होगा कि नहीं, because the IC is Sandeep and Sumir, right? So it's like the heads of who are actually working with you on that deal are the ones who are going to decide whether this deal goes through or not.
Right.
So it's just a little different in terms of...
Got it. Just for the benefit of everyone, guys, so IC is investment committee, where you have the senior partners from the fund who sit and evaluate the deal, and like you have to present your deal to the IC, and if they approve, then the deal goes through. And that's what an investment committee is.
Yeah, and a lot of times even LPs sit through ICs. LPs are people who will actually give and commit funds to your fund, right? Like the capital to your fund. So I think a lot of times, depending on how your situation is with how your arrangement is with the LP, a lot of times even they would sit.
Yeah, again, for the benefit of everyone, LPs are limited partners. So for example, if a fund is, let's say, raising $100 million, it cannot put in by themselves. So they go to limited partners who are like high net worth individuals or various different companies or different sovereign funds and all. And they raise money from these limited partners who put in a VC fund. And then this VC fund puts in to different startups, and LPs are given a certain percentage of return.
Yeah.
So that is just for the benefit of everyone. So let's quickly move to your journey of Harvard. Now you're getting into Harvard, which is like the dream. Actually, your profile is like a dream profile for everyone. SRCC सबको जाना होता है. Then Westbridge, McKinsey, Softbank सबको जाना होता है. Now you're getting into Harvard. I'm just figuring out what do you want to do after Harvard. I'll ask you at the later stage of the interview. But how was your entire GMAT? How was your GMAT prep? How was the entire process, and how did you decide to get into Harvard?
Okay, how did I decide is an easier question. I always so I had gone to HBS campus in 2016 as a part of an Indo-US exchange program back in college.
SRCC.
SRCC ke time pe. And again, as you guys would remember, I come from a place where I don't know how many people actually know about Harvard. So I was astonished to see that there is an institution in the world that that offers so much to its students. So I was like, मेरे को आना तो यही है. And this was back in 2016 when I was in my second year of college. That time it was too soon for me, but I made it a point to be in touch with people who've been to HBS, to just understand what does it take to be there. So I was literally like very sure that I want to go, and I was very sure कि यहीं जाना है और कहीं नहीं जाना, right? So when the right time was, and people told me that about typically 3 to 4 years of work ex is when you start thinking about it seriously, and then you do essays and everything. So during Westbridge, I could have applied, but that time I felt like I wanted to do tech investing more. Plus in 2021, tech was booming in India, right? Like we had deals happening every left, right, center. I don't even like want to know the number of unicorns that got created in 2021. Softbank alone, we did like some 12, 13 deals in 1 year. So I feel like that time I wanted to take that high in life and then do my business school once that high. I didn't know it would fade away this soon in terms of tech investing, but I wanted to like take it a little slower than what I thought I would in 2016. So then I took 1 more year of work experience, and then second year of Softbank I decided this is a good time to go, experience world outside, learn and like develop new skills, network more, make that global network stronger, right? So then the process, how it goes is it takes up a year of your life. The process is extremely tedious, so if you're thinking of doing it, start thinking about it from the day you start thinking about it. Don't like wait till the time you want to apply. So there is GMAT, there are essays, there are letter of recommendations, there's this long application form, and then you have like the interview. So it's literally that 5-6 step process, right? So GMAT and all, I started prepping back in April 2022, last year. Most people that I know at least take 2 to 3 attempts of GMAT to get about 730 plus score. If you're practically gifted and if you're super smart. By the way, GMAT is not a representation of how smart you are. It's a test. Think of this as a test, and a test which is an adaptive test. So most people don't even get it right the first time because we are not used to adaptive tests. By that, what I mean is, depending on whether you answered this previous question right or wrong, your next question ka level gets set. कि उससे hard आएगा, कि उससे easy आएगा, कि उतना ही आएगा. Like what is happening? So you have no clue during this entire examination. You can't skip any question. It's not like CAT. There's no negative marking, but your scores are getting hurt as and when you're scoring, like you're marking the answers wrong, right? So I feel like it's a very different test, so mocks really help. But still, main exam ka stress, main exam ke din hi aata hai, wo mocks tum lete raho, doesn't matter. So at least, so I took 3-4 attempts, GMAT. I think my score was decent, but not like a score which anyone would bang their hands on the table and be like, isse to tumhara ho hi jayega, right? So I had this thing in mind, and I spoke to a lot of my consultants and my friends there, right? A lot of people told me that GMAT matters a lot. A lot of people also told me GMAT doesn't matter for you. Now, what does that for you mean? It basically means what is your profile really, right? Like GMAT is, someone did this math, I don't know the backup of it, but someone told me GMAT is just 12% of your application, right? So if it is just 12% of your application, how much weightage the admissions committee would put onto it is determined by what you've done before business school. If you've done investing, if you've done a career in commerce and business, they know that you're good with numbers. If you have things like McKinsey, Westbridge and Softbank on your CV, they know you're presentable, your communication would be decent. तो GMAT का value कम हो जाता है.
Got it.
और bachelor's में तुम्हारा grade क्या है, right? So can you really sustain in a competitive classroom environment? So GMAT, then you're like, okay, ठीक है, GMAT is okay, manageable. But if you haven't done any of these, right? Like if you've been, let's say, in the social sector where your day-to-day job did not involve so much analysis, so much number crunching, or your grades in college are not that great for any reason, that's when your GMAT becomes important, because then it becomes a way for you to show that I can handle the analytical aptitude that will happen in the class, that will be present in the class, right? So I think that's the reason why GMAT pe people are divided, whether it's the most important thing or not really important. So it really depends on your profile. You should get a really good consultant to help you out with determining this. There are Indian consultants, foreign consultants, anyone that you like working with. Every consultant has a very different style of working. So choose yours. Don't go by the fact that, oh, ye sabka kar raha hai, to main isi ke sath jaunga, ya my friend is taking this or whatever. Doesn't matter. Post GMAT, I cleared. I was settled down at my score by June 2022. I was like, yaar, abhi dena hai to parallelly dete rahenge, but I can't ignore the rest of my application. Lot of essay writing happens in business school applications. So I was only applying to 3 schools. I did Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton.
HSW. Yeah.
HSW. I don't know, like I was like, ठीक है, round 1 में इतना ही करते हैं, क्योंकि you don't want to again compromise on quality of application. अगर नहीं होता किसी में भी, तो I would have thought about round 2. Again, for the benefit of everyone, there's round 1 which happens in September. Which is the early round where people like, most people make it, and then you have like round 2 which is in January, where like people who want to take some more time to apply and whatever, they sort of do it in January. Now essentially GMAT हो गया, जून में मैंने essays लिखने start किए थे. Harvard has 1 essay, Wharton has 2, Stanford has 2. So total of 5 essays. Every school will require 2 letters of recommendation, which is something that your manager or your manager's manager, someone you've worked very closely with across your career, they will give it to you. You write, you tell them, okay, theek hai, these are the things that I've done with you, now why don't you write me a letter of recommendation, and then they help you out with that. They submit it on their own. तुम ऐसे पे focus करते हो.
What exactly is essay about? What type of questions?
So it is again very, very school dependent. They might change it every year, whatever. But Harvard essay is more open-ended. Harvard essay is like, listen, now I have your CV. So everyone will ask for your CV, by the way, and they will tell you that I have your CV, I have your application form, I have your letter of recommendation. What else do you want us to know? It's as simple as that, right? And people talk about things that probably like is not at all business related, right? Like there was a friend who wrote about his love for ice cream and how he wants to establish an ice cream venture in the US, right? There's a friend who wrote about his relationship with his brother in the essay and how that has shaped him as a person. So now one thing to really remember in a Harvard classroom is that they want different perspectives in a classroom. They don't want someone who's exactly, so even though you've done private equity VC and there are like hundreds of people doing private equity VCs who apply, not everyone would make it because you need to have some unique factor that will add to the class. So that's the idea. So you want to show that unique factor in that essay. That's your Harvard essay. Wharton, I think, is a little simpler in terms of essays. One essay is looking, taking into account your career trajectory so far. What Wharton resources do you want to really leverage in your career going ahead? And the other is taking into account your career so far. What is it that you can bring to Wharton? So it's literally like, what can you get and what can you bring?
Yeah.
Simple. And third is Stanford, which is a little more introspective as an essay. The first essay is what matters most to you, right? And again, people talk about things that, again, it's not business related. Like I said, hope matters most to me. So it could be like,
philosophical.
People could go any route, right? Like someone would say, okay, money matters most to me, or someone would say, okay, equality matters most to you. And then you go very vulnerable in that essay and be like, why is it that, like for example, my friend wrote about acceptance matters most to me, or inclusivity matters most to me, because he was born fat, he was an obese child, and he was always, he could bear the pangs of being obese, like, अरे तुम क्या खेलोगे, या तुम तो खाना खाओ, like those kind of things, right? Once that hits you really hard as a child, and then you're like, no, yaar, I would be very inclusive as a person because I wasn't included in the group. So it depends on what matters most to you. And the second question is, why Stanford? So then you do a lot of research, speak to people and understand, acha, why Stanford really, and then have your answers.
What is the word limit of these essays?
Harvard was 900 words.
Okay.
Harvard, by the way, this was the first year where they had put word limit. Uske pehle koi word limit nahi hota tha. Stanford together is 450, and if I'm not wrong, it's about 700, 650 or 700 है, दोनों ऐसे मिला के. So they haven't given a prescription on ये ऐसे इतना होना चाहिए और ये इतना होना चाहिए. It's on you to divide whether you want to keep why Stanford longer or what matters most to you longer. Wharton is super strict, I think 300 and 400.
Okay.
So like very limited word count. again, it gets very tough to put everything in those
Yeah,
200, 300
exactly.
word limit.
I mean-
That's the issue. That's why it takes a lot of time.
Probably they're also testing how do you put in so much of data in just
In
300
just
words
300
to
words.
explain them.
Yeah.
So that
and
also
like, what
shows your
are
skill
you
set.
able to prioritize or not,
Exactly.
right? Like, तुम
Yeah.
सब कुछ बात कर रहे हो या are you going again deep versus
Exactly.
width is what they're checking.
Yeah.
But हाँ, मतलब I started with my Harvard essay, then I moved on to Wharton, and last May I did Stanford because I needed a lot more time to think about Stanford essays. Post which I think you do your application form, which is again a very long form where they'll ask you for your family background, your 3 biggest achievements, 3 curriculars, 3 non-curricular achievements, what matters most to you का वो अलग-अलग variant है basically, and then your job में what was the biggest learning, why did you leave this job, all of those kind of questions. Most people ignore the application form. Please don't. It's very important as a part of your
Ignore
application.
as in like they don't write it seriously.
Write it seriously
Okay.
because they're like हम ऐसे बहुत अच्छे करेंगे, GMAT बहुत अच्छे से करेंगे,
Got it.
and then last moment they realize oh my god, this is like a big application form that I completely forgot about. So they'll like quickly.
It also has some weightage is what you're trying to
100%.
say. Got it.
People read every line of your application,
Got it.
and I realized that in my interview. And then post that, you submit it. फिर तुम interview का wait करो. So again, every college has a different way of evaluating. Like Harvard does a big cut between application and interview shortlist. So 10,000 people in a year submit the application, 2,000 make it to the interview, and 1,000 make it to the class. So once you've made it to the interview, the idea is then to not mess up, because then your probability is still 50%, which was much, much higher than what it was when you were shortlisted down to 2,000, right?
Yeah.
But Stanford, actually Wharton has a very different way of doing things. Wharton invites most of its people for its GD round. So interview वहाँ पे तो GD के जैसे होता है. It's called TBD, which is team-based discussion. You will randomly meet 5 people on a Zoom call from different geographies, and you have to discuss about a topic that is pre-given to you.
Okay.
So they'll send you the topic. You come with your research and everything, and then you try and convince the group of your point of view, and they just observe you. And then post which there's a 10-minute interview where they ask you why Wharton and why MBA. Right, and then second year students take the round, versus in Harvard the admissions committee, the senior admissions committee member takes the round. So
Got
again, very different weightages to the interview round. Stanford, yeah, I didn't make it, so I don't know. But I think my friends basically, what happens is they share your CV with the alum, and then you have an interview with the alum, and they try to keep the alum profile as close to your profile so that they understand what's on your CV.
Got it.
And then
I think
yeah,
Stanford puts more weightage on GMAT, if I'm not wrong.
ऐसा नहीं है यार. I know equally the same number of people who got in with a 730 and did not get in with a 770. So again, GMAT is actually one of the crudest way to say कि actually भाई मतलब मेरा GMAT was not great, but I got a 100% scholarship from Wharton.
Oh, okay.
So and people say that Wharton is a finance school, GMAT this that, GMAT के बिना तो होगा नहीं, ऐसा नहीं होता है.
So I didn't know this. You've got offers from Harvard as well as Wharton.
Harvard
And now you've chosen Harvard over Wharton. Any specific reason?
Yeah, I think just the fact that I didn't want to go into a finance specific school per se, because now I want to keep my ideas and options a little bit more open. Plus, like, I would like to believe that Harvard is a more leadership driven school, more co-curriculars. But I think, yeah, wo doesn't matter. Honestly, doesn't matter between Harvard and Wharton. It was a tough choice to make, especially with the scholarship amount. It was just,
exactly.
I think it was just my dream back in 2016.
Got it.
कि जाना तो यही है. तो
And the fees are around what, $200,000?
Yeah, 230.
Got it.
230K.
And Wharton में 100% scholarship you were getting.
100% tuition scholarship, yeah.
Okay. And what are the tuition fees?
150
Okay.
out of that 230.
Okay, got it.
So
got
I got a 155K scholarship.
Okay, and Harvard में is there any scholarship?
Yeah, there is, but not
Got
as good as Wharton.
Got
But
it.
ठीक है, मतलब I'll
Makes
manage.
sense. And final question maybe. So now you're getting into Harvard. So
What post that?
Yeah, what post that? But I mean, we'll do another podcast probably 2 years down the line where I'll invite you to ask your experience at Harvard. Let's see if you will to become very big. As of now, only you're a very
No.
big person. So I don't know if you'll respond. But what exactly do you have
Feedback
in your
well
mind?
taken, Kushal. Again. Okay.
What exactly do you have in your mind post your MBA?
Yeah,
You want to get into
this is-
investing, entrepreneurship, bunch of
This
options.
is actually the first time I'm keeping myself really like in the go with the flow mode.
Okay.
Otherwise, I've always been like very खट कि इसके बाद ये
ये
करना है,
चाहिए,
इसके
ये
बाद ये
चाहिए.
करना है. But right now is the time where I want to keep myself really like open to ideas, open to thoughts, and open to change of career and also open to the fact that I might be back in investing. So at some point, the only thing I'm clear about is at some point in my life, I want to try my hands at entrepreneurship, because again, like that energy, that desire to build something and create that impact still sort of takes the front seat in my life. But when is the right time? Where is it that you want to do it? Whether it's India, US, like everything is a TBD at this point in time. And I would like to go like that a little bit, where I want to just
I think if you start up, you have 2 investors ready, right? Westbridge and Softbank. So probably.
I would like to believe so that my angel is sorted. Baki seed A or series dekhenge.
Yeah,
That's
got it.
true.
No, but thank you so much for doing this. It was amazing talking to you. I think this is going to be super helpful to everyone who's watching this. And
I
the way
hope
you
so.
answered every question very frankly and in a very candid manner, I'm sure like people are going to get a lot of value from this podcast.
Thank you so much, and I hope you guys. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not that active at social
guys,
media.
I'll be honest, don't reach out because I think I've tried reaching out on LinkedIn multiple times. Then I sent that email wala feature and then I got in touch with her via.
No, I think it's just no, it's just that a lot of people reach out, but I'll make sure over the next 2 months when I'm a little free.
Probably you can reach out to her on TopMate if I'm not wrong. You're active there. So
I'm not very active on TopMate, but sure, like there's a link on my profile.
Yeah.
So if you think that's helpful, happy to help.
No, definitely. I think guys, if you're planning for something like a B school or something like a VCP job, there like she also helps people in terms of preparing for interviews, helping for resumes and all of that. So feel free to reach out through her LinkedIn. So thank you so much, Sanchie, once again.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this. Had an amazing time.
To you. I have a question for you.
Yeah, okay. This is on camera or off camera?
No, on camera.
Okay.
मैं बहुत fun question पूछूंगी. मैं आपसे guesstimate नहीं कराऊंगी. Tension मत लो आप. What's the music artist you follow? Who's the music artist you follow?
I am a very boring person, to be honest. I don't follow any music artist, if you ask me. One person whose music content I consume would be maybe who's that guy? I was listening to this song yesterday only. English or
anything is okay. I'm a very music person.
Okay, I think not AR Rahman. Probably Arman Malik. Yeah, I like his voice.
Okay, and in case you guys have any suggestions around which music really takes away your mind, I think you should put it in comments. I am a big fan of music, so
okay.
I wish I could play an instrument.
You do you sing or do you like?
No, I just listen. I just listen to music. I know मैंने बोला मैं sing. If I sing, you'll be like, अभी why don't we do a? नहीं, मैं सिर्फ सुनती हूँ. But guys, like, thank you so much, Kushal, for inviting, and hopefully it's helpful for people who are on the same journey. But yeah, see you soon.
Perfect, and all the best for your Harvard journey. I'm sure you're going to kill it. And let's see what's next for you after your Harvard.
Yes, a big change awaits.
Yeah,
but, thanks.
definitely. Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Perfect.